Greetings all. Dave and I wanted to use this video to help introduce the musical and the movie Hair, which is really a seminal piece from the 60s. In many ways, Hair is the sort of the classic depiction of the counterculture. Extremely influential, extremely controversial, and we think even some 40, 50 years later, important for you to have a sense of. So Dave and I were going to talk initially now about sort of what Hair was and why it was so so deeply affecting in terms of the larger culture. So Dave, you got some thoughts about this?
Right. You know, in some ways, this is going to be a kind of a preparation for our next class on Wednesday, where we're going to be talking about how the larger culture assimilated the counterculture. Right. And what that involved. Because if you take a look at this film, what we have here is a packaging of the counterculture as a product. It's an entertainment product. It's non-threatening, something people can enjoy spending an hour and a half with. And it romanticizes the counterculture in ways that we have come to realize is fairly one-sided, but that is very typical of the commercialization of the counterculture that we're going to be talking about on Wednesday.
Right. The Hair was previewed on off-Broadway in the late 1960s and made it to Broadway in 68 and 69, where it ran for several years. Hair, the musical, was really actually very complicated. As Broadway musicals go, it had really a third more songs than most Broadway musicals. It also featured nudity at the end of Act One, which is one of the things that made Hair on Broadway really extremely controversial. It was known kind of euphemistically as the kind of nudie musical, but it is remarkably powerful and remarkably affecting music. A number of the songs that were in the musical and later in the movie became popular hits across the United States.
Yeah, one of them, well, probably the single most popular hit was a medley of the tunes Aquarius and Let the Sunshine In, done by Fifth Dimension.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because these are kind of bookends for the film as well. It starts off with Aquarius and ends with Sunshine, Let the Sunshine In. And we're going to watch both of those. But the first scene involves a Midwestern boy, right. Claude Bukowski, and we see his father taking him to the bus stop on a lonely stretch of highway in Oklahoma, just a little bit more than a wide dirt road.
Oh, yeah.
And he gets on the bus in Oklahoma and gets off the bus in New York City. So the clip that we're going to be showing you shows him coming into New York City, going through the tunnel, and that's basically like the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah.
The world that he finds on the other side is nothing like he's ever even dreamed of before.
That's precisely it. It's a completely different universe. Yeah.
Yeah. Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore.
That's exactly right. And so as the scene opens then in New York, as he exits the bus, you'll see this tunnel and you'll see members of the tribe, the key members of the Assembly of Hair, burning the draft cards in an act of protest that was pretty common in this era. All men over the age of 19 carried a draft card, which was essentially a kind of identification card, but that card was essentially a kind of, well, it was connected to the war, right? Because young men were being drafted, conscripted into service into Vietnam, and by burning the draft card, in a sense, you were turning your back on the war. From that, then,
and you were committing a felony.
Committing a felony, yeah, it's a serious crime. And then from there, then the scene opens up into Central Park itself, singing, dancing, and the age of Aquarius. And so I think what we'd like to do now is for you to click on that scene, take a look at it, and then we'll come back here in a second and introduce the next scene. This next scene that we'd like you to take a look at, or actually take a listen to, is the title song, "Hair." It's a celebration of the political act of growing your hair long, particularly for men. And as you will see, because we're going to have you watch a recording that is not taken from the movie, but in fact a cast recording where you'll be able to see the lyrics, that it is a fairly complex and intense celebration of hair.
Yeah, and in the movie, it leads into a scene where one of the main characters, Berger, is actually going to his parents to ask them for money because his friends are in jail and he needs to bail them out. And his father basically offers him the money that he needs if he'll get his hair cut. And he refuses to do that. It says it's just the one thing that he can't do. And his father, of course, doesn't understand. It's a wonderful example of a generation gap. So bear that in mind as you're watching the movie. And then his mother comes before he goes and slips him the cash. Like mothers.
That's right. But interestingly, I mean, this is actually something I think that played out in many American homes. This battle over the length of hair. It was extremely common. And so the act of growing hair was a kind of symbol, a visible symbol that you were part of the counterculture. Included this song celebrates that. So click on it, take a look at those lyrics, and then come back here in a moment, and we will have you look at maybe one more clip.
It's because I'm used to seeing people with all different lengths of hair and nobody making a big deal about it. But this is something that actually broke homes.
That's absolutely true.
That kids would leave home because as long as you're living under my roof, you're going to get that haircut, and they'd leave. And that will be estranged from their parents for years or maybe never reconcile.
No, that's exactly right.
On this issue.
On this issue, pardon me, a personal story, but even though I was a kid, hair in my house was tightly regulated, and so if your hair was touching your ears, it was time for a haircut, mister. And so in my house, we had the same kind of battle, even though I was 9 years old or something like that, because it was cool to grow your hair long. But yet so many people saw that as was deeply problematic. Just really, it was the wrong kind of message to be sending by having long hair.
Well, because everybody understood what the meaning was.
Yes.
It was absolutely symbolic, and they understood that is the rejection or the beginning of saying goodbye to society as we know it. That's
exactly right. And so, I mean, I think in the eyes of parents, making sure that their little boy's hair was cut short kept them on the kind of straight and narrow path. And if you saw, and there were only a handful of kids in my age back in 1970, 71 who had long hair, but it said something not only about them, but about their parents. So let's take a look at this, take a listen to this song, and we'll be interested in your feedback. We'll have one more clip for you to take a look at here in a moment. This last scene that we'd like you to take a look at is really the closing scene of the film, and it also features one of the more well-known and powerful pieces, musical pieces, and that's "Let the Sun Shine In." But there's a lot of things happening in terms of the visuals that we want you to have some sense of. Dave's going to talk about a couple of those here.
Yeah, when the video starts off, or when our segment starts off, we see the tribe, the Friends, gathered at Arlington Cemetery, which is a symbol of the destruction and the waste that has been caused by the government's war policies and terrible Vietnam policies. Just thousands of white crosses in straight rows, and this song is kind of a reaction to that, a response to that. And it's the typical counterculture response, the idea we are on the right side of history.
Absolutely.
The other side is the dark side, and it's the side that we have to overcome. And we're going to do that. It's going to happen. It's going to happen because we have the right impulses. We have the right forces. We have sunshine power. We have love.
Right.
We have peace. And overwhelming. And it's just, it's an irresistible force, and it's going to happen. And that was the conviction of most of the people who were participating in the counterculture.
Well, I think that's
what's going on over there is bad, but we're getting it. We're on the right side, and the tide is with us. We have the momentum, and we're going to win.
And you really get a sense of this then at the very end of this clip that you're watching, where just thousands of people flood onto the National Mall in Washington. And it's just this tidal wave of humanity, a tidal wave of love. And it is sort of the age of Aquarius being realized, right? That this counterculture is not just a handful of people in a park, but in fact is a kind of mass movement. Now it's very kind of hopeful and overly optimistic kind of take on everything. But I think it was a powerful sense in this era that there were a lot more of us, right? People who were on the side of light than people would guess. And when we all get together, it's just this kind of amazing force. Dave, you have a couple final thoughts about just the overall significance of hair as a kind of cultural symbol, the film and the musical.
Well, we've already talked about the symbol of hair. So it's interesting that it's the title that they took. It's interesting that is kind of the central piece of this musical. And as a product, as something that they've packaged for mass consumption, I think it puts the counterculture in a nice little nutshell for people who don't understand anything about it to kind of get a feeling for what it was about and what it was like.
I think that's well said. I think it does serve as a kind of time capsule. I mean, I think it clearly had a place in the late 1960s. I mean, it really was very much a kind of piece for the moment. It really spoke to this reality. But as we are, more distance from it, it's just, I think, a very valuable kind of insight into a very interesting and I think somewhat misunderstood time. So we appreciate you listening to us. So go ahead and follow through with this last clip, and then we look forward to our discussion in class. Thanks, everybody.
See you then.